Today, we are going to be discussing 6 reasons you will fall victim to a ransomware attack, because everyone's on social media. It's not a question of if anymore, it's just when. So we're going to get started. Throughout the presentation, we're going to be pushing some questions, some polls to you. So this is just going to be, outline the instructions on how you can answer those questions. It'll help us process what to do next, so that we can listen when you all speak about the challenges that you're facing with ransomware and the fears of attacks that surround it. And today, our esteemed speakers have a cumulative of maybe, 25 years. I don't want to age everyone too much, but joining us is Cody Cooper and Steve O. These gentlemen have evolved with ransom attacks over the years. They have done the simple to the very, very complicated. Just an unbelievable wealth of knowledge between these two gentlemen. Also in the war room, we have DiamondIT CEO Matt Mayo and Jeremy Mahan, and they will be answering any of your questions as we're going throughout. So please feel comfortable and feel free to push those questions the entire time, and we will get back to you very, very quickly. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Cody Cooper.
All right. Thank you, Tabitha. Thank you, everyone. Good morning/afternoon for those of you joining us around the world. The agenda today, brief but hopefully very informative, will be about a 45-minute to an hour webinar about the 6 reasons why you will most likely fall to ransomware. What we're going to be covering today is a brief introduction to information security, just kind of what that means, how it affects the business or the organization, and how we can use that information to then discuss ransomware. We're going to discuss where ransomware comes from, how it works, what it does, what it really means. Then we will get into the meat and potatoes, the 6 reasons why you will most likely fall to ransomware or get hit by ransomware. And then my favorite part of the agenda today is Steven from SentinelOne is going to do a ransomware demo for us. So you guys will be able to see live a machine get hit with ransomware. You'll be able to see how it affects everything on the machine, the ransomware note, and a sneaky little trick that SentinelOne has to, let's say, roll back that ransomware and make it as if it was never there. So I'm very excited for that. I hope you guys are really interested and engaged. So if you have any questions, as Tabitha mentioned before, feel free to see them or write them in chat. I may not necessarily see them, but one of the people on my team will, and we will answer it. If not during the webinar, then right after at the questions and the conclusion. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. But please, if you guys do have any questions, ask them. And one final note, there will be some polls that come up occasionally in chat. You will see some questions and you'll be able to provide some answers to those. Please engage them if you can. They're more for everyone to just kind of share what they've experienced, because we're all in this together. Security is best done as a village and not as an individual. So without further ado, we will go ahead and get started here. So when we talk about information security, we're really talking about the systems, the data, the applications, the computers, the cell phones, anything and everything that basically has electricity running through it for a business or an organization counts as information security. And that can mean both, the servers and the data, but it can also mean the building itself, the fences around it, the lock on the front door. All of that has to do with information security. And the goal behind information security is to protect what we call the CIA triangle. And this is not the Bermuda Triangle, and it does not involve any secret agents. Unfortunately, as some of my guys wish it does whenever I talk about CIA, what it really involves is the acronym, the C of confidentiality, making sure that your information is confidential, it's not spread around, it's not public. Oftentimes, this is very important for health sectors. This is very important for data brokers and institutions where whatever it is that they have, they want to keep it secret. On the flip side, we have integrity. Integrity often will be really important for banks or, say, schools that have grades for their students, right? You want to protect that data to keep it from getting manipulated or changed in any way. You want that data to always be accurate. And then finally, we have availability. Availability at first seems odd, but what's really important to availability is for companies like Amazon, right? They want that website up 24/7, every day, every hour, every moment of every day, so they can always take in more orders. similar to Netflix. Netflix always wants to have something come up, have their stuff working, be able to watch a video at any point in any time. So Netflix doesn't really care if you know what movies are on their movie list, and they don't necessarily care too much if somebody were to go in and change the, the runtime of a video, right? If they were to manipulate the data, the integrity of it. But Netflix absolutely cares about the availability. They want everyone to be able to access their stuff at any given time. Often you will find that there's a mix of these. Information security deals with making sure all three of these things are contained together and are essential for every organization, but usually most organizations will prioritize one of these three things. And so I guess the next question would be, how do we protect that, right? How does cybersecurity involve itself in such a way as to protect the CIA triad or the CIA triangle, right? Well, when it comes to security, it's a lot like an onion. It's layers. It's numerous layers of both systems and people and processes in place to try and make sure those CIA points are protected. So when I talk about the human layer, what I'm really talking about is that gut check, that sanity check, right? They're going through their emails and you see that email from the Nigerian prince who's offering you money. That human layer is supposed to say, I don't know any Nigerian princes. Most of the people I know are just located in California. This probably seems suspicious. That's that human layer, that human firewall. And as we go through this, you guys will very quickly learn that the human layer is oftentimes the most important, but it's only one of many. You have that perimeter layer, you have that spam filter that guards your email, that firewall that makes sure the bad guys don't get in. You have your network security, so even if they do get in, even if they do get through that email filter or that firewall filter, they then can't figure out how to get to the servers inside that network. You have endpoint security, endpoint meaning any computer or any phone or tablet or desktop. Oftentimes that's protected by antivirus like Trend Micro or Windows Defender, etc. And then we have the application security patches for those programs, and then data security, making sure your data is safe, it's encrypted, no one can touch it. And I'll go over these layers in more detail in a moment, but the idea behind it is you have layers of security, and no one layer is going to keep everything out. You're going to deal with attacks every day. Right now, at this very moment, most likely your business is attempted to be infiltrated by somebody at the firewall layer or at the human layer. Someone's currently writing a phishing email to somebody in this webinar, I'm sure. And your spam filter is going to try and catch it. Your firewall is going to try and catch it. If it gets the human, hopefully the human catches it, right? And I'll go through some of this a bit more in detail, but that's kind of the general idea behind cybersecurity in general. And to give you an idea of, dealing with a minor cold here. To give you an idea real quick, this is just the average 30 days for a DiamondIT client, right? We're usually blocking somewhere in the realm of 200,000 attacks a given month. And these attacks can be all kinds of things. They can be botnets, they can be intrusion attempts, they can be people clicking on links that redirect to bad or fake websites. They can be all kinds of stuff. And it can come from anywhere in the world. It can come from the United States. It can come from outside of the United States. As you can see here, Russia, China, Iran, and United States itself are the biggest threats. And oftentimes people can hide where they're coming from. There's different various ways around it. But I think the point that I want everyone to understand, though, is all those numbers, those 200,000 attacks that we see every month, that only is seen at the perimeter security layer. That's just from our firewall. That doesn't cover how many viruses our endpoint with Sentinel-1 stops. It doesn't cover how many phishing emails are stopped by our spam filter, or how many emails are actually read by a human, and then the human says, this seems weird, and deletes it. That 200,000 attacks that happen every month, that was only from our second layer, our perimeter security layer. So when it comes to information security, those layers, they're not foolproof. They're not going to stop everything. And that's why we're doing this presentation today, just to give you guys an idea of probably the 6 easiest ways that you can protect yourself and be aware of how ransomware is going to get you. So as we go through that, just keep that in mind. There's many, many layers to this. I want to go ahead and pivot for a moment here to ransomware itself. Now, ransomware is actually a play on words, right? You have the word ransom. And I think, if I remember right, the very first incident of a really popular ransom, I guess you could say attack, was actually back in BC with Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was one of the first emperors of Rome who had ever been captured, and he was captured by pirates in the Mediterranean Sea. and they held him for ransom for what at the time was called 50 talents. Now, a single talent is roughly 50 pounds of silver. So he was held ransom for 2,500 pounds of silver, which he ended up paying, and he was released. But ransom is this sort of, it's as old as humans are. They will capture a person or a thing that's important, and they want payment back in order to release it. The ware just comes from the word software. So if you smash it together, you just have ransomware. And ransomware is a very broad term. It can mean a lot of different things, but in general, it is a piece of software that holds something important for a ransom, so someone has to pay for it. And ransomware itself isn't new. Ransomware was first, I guess you could say, presented back in 1996 in Columbia University. And at the time, it was labeled as cryptoviral extortion, which is a very heavy term, and you can see why everyone uses ransomware now. But it's very old. It's been around now for about 25 years. We've been dealing with it for that same amount of time. It's just gotten easier and easier for people to get their hands on ransomware, which is why you're seeing more and more of it through the news. And we all know what ransomware, we all know the effects that it has. We all know how important it is. We've heard about it every day. It's kind of why we're here. So I don't want to harp on the fact that ransomware is becoming popular, because it is. It's hitting video game industries. If you guys have heard of the video game Street Fighter, that company was hit last year. If you guys have ever bought a chair, an office chair from Steelcase, their entire manufacturing plant was shut down for 2 weeks from ransomware. It's hit sports companies. It's hit governments, including Iran and Israel, United States, as we heard about last year. So ransomware is this huge thing. The question begs, though, is what is ransomware and where does it come from? And unfortunately, it's very easy to get ransomware. Ransomware is created by something called there's a typo though, APTs, not ATPs, Advanced Persistent Threats, otherwise known as ransomware gangs. These ransomware gangs are just groups of people. They exist on the internet, and they create ransomware. They create a piece of software. That piece of software can then be bought and sold online, and somebody can buy it and attempt to infect your network with it. Excuse me. And I'm going to show you in a moment kind of how this works out. But I just want you guys to get the idea that ransomware, it's not something that is new. It's been around for a while, and it's something that a lot of people have access to. And when I say a lot of people, what I mean is governments, government-backed organizations, criminal organizations. It's become popular because it's easy to make and it's easy to distribute. Now, there's a couple things that you guys might hear. If you guys ever watch the news, you'll hear about some different groups of people. These groups are generally the ones that are attacking us with ransomware. This group in particular, the Equation Group, sometimes known as the Shadow Brokers. Going back to this slide, it looks like a boy band. The Shadow Brokers are based out of the United States. As far as we can tell, they're either current or prior NSA employees, we think. And what they like to do is they like to infiltrate systems overseas. They like to spy on them through those systems and then eventually release ransomware on those target machines. A similar group called Fancy Bear. Fancy Bear originates out of Russia. They also do a lot of ransomware. What they tend to do is they tend to target high individual employees and organizations. They will go on LinkedIn. They will search your LinkedIn to figure out who's in charge or who's in charge of finance or who has a important role in an organization, and they will specifically email that person or pretend to be that person, mimicking their social media posts and how they talk and how they interact online to try and pretend to be that person and get you to open that attachment. And then you also have Dynamite Panda, another one from China. Their primary target is the United States. This one was behind a really large HIPAA breach back in 2014 that I think it had either 4.5 million people were affected by this one, and it was all infected by ransomware as well. So I want people to get the idea and to understand that when it comes to ransomware, while it is easy to get hit by ransomware and it's easy to find examples of ransomware, more often than not, the vast majority of ransomware attacks are done by fairly sophisticated groups. And I'll show you in a minute what I mean by that when you see the ransom note. So remember back when we talked about the CIA triangle? What ransomware does is it tries to affect the availability and the confidentiality, generally speaking. What it does is it tries to take your data, your programs, your files, and make it so they don't work anymore. They tend to leave the integrity of the files alone. They don't want to change the actual data itself because they want you to pay for the ransom. If they change that data and you pay the ransom, you're going to find out your data is not working or it's wrong or it's corrupt, and then no one's going to pay the ransom anymore. So more often than not, they're going to maintain that data. They're going to keep it safe for you, but they're not going to let you touch it. They're not going to let you use it until you have paid the ransom. That's the idea behind it. Now, over time, this has changed. They have figured out that a lot of companies are starting to have more and more backups. And so instead of paying the ransom, the company just restores to that backup from the prior day or the prior week or whatever. So what they've done to adapt to that is they've started downloading that data. And once they finish downloading it, then they encrypt it. And they threaten to release that data to the public or to whoever would be interested in it as a way to say, hey, just restoring from backup isn't going to save you anymore. That data is still going to be out there and it's still going to be public. So that's the way that they've gotten around it. So it used to be if you had backups, you were safe. But now you're currently going to be dealing with not only your data that's been encrypted and not available, but now you're also possibly dealing with you're going to be dealing with information that's been revealed to the public. There's a little note here on the bottom, which I wrote that says normally they won't target data integrity. There's an exception to that. And it's very, very recent that we started seeing it. And I'll get to that in a second. But generally speaking, they don't want to target your integrity of your data. The way that the groups work is they will first get access to the network. This is mostly going to be done through social engineering or through email or a combination of the two, sometimes through other means such as a vulnerability or a mobile device or something like that. But the first thing they're going to do is they're going to get access to your network. Once they get access, they're going to poke around. They're going to be very quiet about it. They're going to do their very, very best to not get caught. And they're going to look around until they find all of your data and all of your backups. They're going to search. Once they've found it, they will first encrypt your backups so you can't restore from backup. Then they're going to download all of your current data so that they can release it if you don't pay the ransom. Finally, once they're confident they have all your data and they're confident that they've encrypted the backups, then they will encrypt everything else. And the way it works is it spreads from one machine to the next, and it will very, very quickly take over the entire network. Once that's been done, usually you'll find a ransom note. I'll show you a couple examples in a moment, and Stephen will also demonstrate for you what that ransom note can look like. That ransom note will then have various instructions on it and things that you need to do in order to get your information back. But that's kind of how it works. It's very intelligent the way that they operate, and they're very sophisticated, generally speaking. So don't underestimate them. Definitely take this seriously, as many of us are these days. So a couple signs of ransomware, and you guys will see this again when you watch Stephen do the demo. You're going to see the computer might possibly lock itself without you touching anything, but more often than not, what you really will see is files will start changing. They will originally have looked like Word documents or PowerPoint documents. They will instead change into just white text documents or something similar. And they'll all have the same name, or they'll have some sort of name change in it. And they'll all look very identical. And you can see this happen live when Stephen does it. And then eventually you'll have the ransom note. Here's an example of a ransom note from some time ago. Not actually from 1970, as it seems to say right there, but this is a ransom note from the WannaCry ransom that came out a few years ago. And there's a lot of stuff that I think is really interesting about this ransom note. Remember I talked about they generally are interested in your confidentiality and your availability, and generally they don't touch integrity, right? Well, notice here on the left, your files will be lost on this time and this date. And they have a countdown timer, right? What they've started doing is they've started deleting your files every hour that you don't pay the ransom. So they increase that pressure. And then on top of it, they increase the price of the ransom. So every hour that you don't pay the ransom, the price goes up another 1,000. A few interesting things to note. They generally are going to be paid by Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency. So it's hard to track, hard to find them, whether they're in the United States or somewhere else, it doesn't matter. It's going to be almost impossible to figure out where they are if you're paying through cryptocurrency. And notice down here in the bottom left, the contact us button. I've even seen it with telephone numbers you can call, where if you, where if you're confused, if you pay the ransom, but you still can't figure out how to unencrypt your software, how to get your data back, you can actually call them and you can get technical support, and they will answer the phone and they will walk you through the process to unencrypt the stuff that they just encrypted and took from you in order for you to get access to it again. Because the idea behind it, right, is they want you to pay the ransom. So any ransomware group, any of those advanced persistent threats, if they get a reputation for not honoring the ransom payment, they will quickly find that people aren't paying the ransom anymore. So it's in their best interest that they try and get you to get your data back if you pay for it. Notice they even have the best time, the best time to call them and to work with them. So customer service for ransomware gangs, you could say, is on the rise, unfortunately. And here's another example of a ransomware that came out last year called Emotet. Emotet was a very interesting case that actually didn't start as ransomware. It started out as a virus in emails that just kind of sent out spam, but it quickly evolved that year to a much bigger issue where the virus would read your emails. It would figure out who you most often contact. It would figure out phrases and key sentences from those emails, and it would automatically create new emails to those same contacts using the same phrases and sentences as before, but they would attach a payload for ransomware on top of it. Excuse me. And so that trusted person who trusts you would get that email from you. It would be sent from you. It would seem as if you had written it about a very relevant topic that both of you had been talking about with an attachment. An attachment might say invoice or schedule or whatever. And that's how Emotet was spreading from business to business to business. As you guys can see on the bottom, it ended up costing on the average about $700,000 to remediate per a company that was hit by it. So it's not always going to go after, it's not always going to go in through the way you expect. It could come in from somebody you even trust. That's why you always need to be careful. And we'll go into that more detail later about the human firewall and security awareness training. So we have a rough idea of what ransomware is. I think you guys kind of understand, right? It's a piece of software that gets on machines that then holds your data hostage. What I want to talk about now is the most likely reasons of why you will get hit or how you will get hit. And I promise you, based on my experience, and I think Stephen would back me up on this, if you just look at these 6 parts of your network, just give them a good critical eye, you will find that your chances of succumbing to ransomware is vastly, vastly reduced. The vast majority of cases that I've read, that I've researched on, and that I have experienced with our clients usually are hit through one of these 6 gaps. And really that's what they are, right? They're security gaps. Either you don't have a product such as an antivirus on your machines, or perhaps you have a firewall, but it's not quite as configured as it should be, or you have a server that maybe isn't patched and up to date, and so they're vulnerable to a vulnerability or an exploit out there. They're all just security gaps. So as we go through this, more often than not, it's just our own ignorance and our own realization that, oh, we really need to fill this gap. So I'm going to go ahead and count down from number 6 to number 1 because I enjoy the suspense. So bear with me here. But at number 6, mobile devices. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much data is on their mobile devices. I'll go ahead and let you guys read the statistics on the left side here. But when we talk about mobile devices, we're talking about cell phones and tablets and laptops and really anything that someone can easily pick up and be mobile with them, right? Well, what's on that laptop? Probably some saved website passwords, maybe to your bank or to Outlook.com, or maybe you've saved the password to your Outlook program. So when you open Outlook every day, you don't have to type it in again. You might have some company files on it, you know. And also in a section in there is going to be all your saved passwords under the Windows Credential Manager, for example. Let's say someone gets that laptop and they're able to log into that laptop. They're able to guess your password, or you potentially don't even have a password, or your device isn't encrypted. They get on your laptop. Now they have access to your Outlook. They have access to all of your contacts. They have access to all the topics that make sense. And they can very easily create an email sent what appears to be from you, from your Outlook account, to somebody else with a ransomware payload in it. Or let's say, for example, you have OneDrive or you have ShareDrive or Citrix Share files on your computer, and you have that saved. So every time you turn your computer on, you automatically log into OneDrive or Google Drive or whatever. They now have access to all of your company data on that drive, and they can then encrypt it very easily. I'm curious how many people, and I know we're putting some polls up in chat now, I'm curious how many people actually have encrypted their laptops, because it's very easy to remove a hard drive from a laptop, plug it into another one, and manipulate that data and steal credentials from it. So if anything, if I could warn you to anything, it would be to figure out a way to manage your mobile devices. More often than not, people who have Outlook or Microsoft 365, you most likely already have the ability to manage your mobile devices and you don't even realize it. You have Microsoft Intune and a Microsoft Endpoint Management Portal and things like that your IT team should be utilizing at very little cost to secure and encrypt those devices to prevent them from being exploited, to have ransomware spread throughout your network. SentinelOne is also currently working on a mobile device application as well to put on various mobile OSs that we are very, very excited about, that I think will also reduce this problem quite a bit. But coming in at number 6, mobile devices, definitely check those out. Definitely look at them. They are on the rise, as we can see. At number 5, when I talk about endpoint protection, what that used to be was antivirus. It used to just be Trend Micro or McAfee or Kaspersky or whatever. But endpoint protection has really evolved from just antivirus. When you look at products like SentinelOne, they often will call themselves advanced endpoint protection or enhanced endpoint protection because they're no longer just an antivirus. They do so much more. And forgive me for a moment for being really excited about this, but the endpoint protection that I recommend to all of our clients and that we use internally, which is SentinelOne with Steven, it does much more than just look for viruses. I very much hinted at the ransomware rollback feature that they have, but it also does things such as isolating that machine. If that machine gets infected with something, it will isolate that machine from the rest of the network, so only that machine's infected and nothing else. Or, for example, USBs. If you guys have heard at all that you shouldn't just plug whatever random USB you find in a parking lot into your computer, right? True advanced endpoint protection will prevent you from plugging in that USB drive unless it's been authorized by the IT team or somebody else. So I really encourage you, take a look at what you're using for endpoint protection, do some research on it. There was a case that happened roughly 6 years ago, back in 2015, where President Trump accused the antivirus company of Kaspersky of being aligned with the Russian government. And there was this large court case and court battle that came out of it, where Kaspersky was accused by the NSA and the White House of using their access through their antivirus that had been installed on millions of machines around the world to spy on those people and spy on those users. And what ended up happening is the case ended up getting dismissed. Kaspersky moved all of their servers from Russia, Moscow, Russia, to Switzerland, and they're now hosted in Switzerland database. And they've done a lot to improve their transparency to try and combat that, I guess you could say, reputation. But the damage has somewhat already been done in terms of what happened in the news. And I'm not saying that Kaspersky is or isn't a problem, but what I am encouraging you to do is just do your research on endpoint protection, do your research on the kind of software out there. Remember, you often get what you pay for, and take a look. Make sure it's getting updated all the time. Make sure it's on all of your machines. You really don't want to have that one single machine that doesn't have it get infected, because then that can be used to pivot to the rest of your environment and infect everything else. So definitely do your research with that. If you have any questions, please reach out to me or really anyone on this panel about endpoint protection. Coming in at number 4, if you've been on the internet for a while, you've probably seen this meme. This is the dog sitting in the apartment with everything around him on fire, and he's like, "Oh, this is fine," right? This is not how you want incident response plan to be. You don't want to be dealing with ransomware and sitting there thinking, no, it's okay, we got it under control. Or even the opposite, running around with your head cut off like a chicken, right? You want to be somewhere in the middle where you were actively and aggressively trying to contain that incident and respond to it. Oftentimes when I see clients who have been hit by ransomware, or potential clients, I should say, generally speaking, they don't really have a plan. And they run around everywhere trying to figure out what to do about this ransomware. And it's not too late. Just because you've been hit by ransomware doesn't mean that it has to take down your entire business. If you take a moment, you step back and you think about it and you follow a plan that you've perhaps rehearsed or at least written out together, you can contain that ransomware to just a few machines. Or you can very effectively roll back that ransomware or recover a backup from that ransomware and not be down for days or potentially weeks or forever because of that. So an incident response plan, incredibly important. I think a lot of times we tend to overlook incident response plans. It's not that sexy tool that IT likes to talk about. And it's oftentimes a large document that you have to read, and it's somewhat boring. It comes with this checklist of things that you have to do. But I promise you, when the time comes, when you do get hit by ransomware, whether you're able to deal with it or not, it's going to make the difference. It's going to involve things like cybersecurity insurance and talking to a remediation group such as DiamondIT or another firm that does cybersecurity remediation. It's going to make it a lot less painful. Perhaps even insurance will cover you and pay you back for whatever damages the ransomware has caused, assuming you have a response plan in place and you use that plan as part of the insurance's policy. So really important, number 4, incident response plan. Definitely make sure you have one. If you don't, feel free to reach out to us as well. This one is near and dear to my heart. This one has caused a lot of fights here at DiamondIT between engineers and security professionals over what counts as good and weak access control. I really like this little comic here of these people playing cards, and I'm out, and the next person is also out, and then they go to the 90s hacker from the typical 1990s movie. And he's got his beanie up and his glasses on, and he's like, "I'm in." That's access control. Access control is the passwords we use to type in to log into our computer or log into our email. Access control is what we use to access our systems, access our programs. Access control is what we call multi-factor authentication, where you get that text on your phone or whatever. Now, oftentimes it can be a bit, it can get in the way, to be honest. I have had many clients where I suggest multi-factor authentication to them, MFA, and they don't want to deal with the text message on their phone, or they don't want all of their employees to have to do a work-related thing on their phone in order to log into their system. I understand the challenge behind that, but unfortunately in today's world, if you have weak access control, it's only a matter of time until ransomware gets you. And it seems simple. It seems like we should all have passwords, and it seems like we should be beyond this topic, but I really encourage you to take a look, do an audit of your own employees to figure out, is everyone using a secure password? Is that password complex enough? Is it shared amongst other people? And I really, really want to emphasize this. We had a client call in just Monday, 3 days ago, and they asked us to reset their credentials because they couldn't log in. And they said, please turn off the password. I never had a password before on my email. And the technician who had gotten that particular ticket came to me and he said that the person, they didn't want a password on their email. They just wanted to go to outlook.com, type in their email address, and it would go into their email. And, unfortunately, we can't do that anymore in today's world. And we had to explain to the user that you really do need an email at the very least. You need a password and preferably MFA on top of it. And they were very understanding, and I think we gained a lot of ground in terms of security awareness training for them. But just the idea of not having a password because you're so used to it, you're so used to that convenience, we can't do that anymore. I know that oftentimes we like to hit that little checkbox that says remember our password or remember me when we log into something. The problem is the moment someone gets your laptop or they get access to your computer or anything like that, they're already in, and there's nothing to stop them. It is one of the top reasons why a company is breached. And I know for those of you who can do math, unlike me, 85% and 61% goes above 100%. That is because these are elements of a breach. 85% of all breaches involve a human interaction in some fashion, usually a email trying to trick you or something similar. But on top of that, 60% of all of those breaches also involve bad credentials or some sort of access control that didn't have MFA. So that's a huge jump. 60% of all breaches everywhere involving ransomware was because someone either didn't have MFA or they didn't have a secure password. Their password was password or 123 or whatever. That's a staggering number, especially considering 2021, when we're all trying to harp on passwords and access control. For those of you who haven't heard, SolarWinds was hacked last year, 2 years ago, and it ended up becoming the biggest hack of the United States government in history. For those of you who haven't done some research on it, it is a little bit embarrassing because the way that they were able to get in was they were able to get into a system that didn't have a password. And the only reason that they even found out that somebody was in their system was that the hackers, they attempted to access a secondary system inside that network, and it created an MFA text on a user's cell phone. And that user got the text that said, hey, you're trying to access this, here's your digits, here's your codes you type in. And they said, well, wait a minute, I didn't ask for access to this. I didn't try to log into this. So then they started asking questions of their coworkers. Those coworkers started asking more questions, and pretty soon they started looking into it to see what had happened, and they realized that they had been breached, and they'd been breached possibly for months or even years, all because one little system, one little back-end website that no one ever used didn't have a password on it. So please definitely take passwords seriously. JP Morgan, one of the largest financial and investment firms in the world, that foreign governments, dignitaries, billionaires, everybody who has more money than me uses, they also got breached back in 2017. And the way that they were breached was somebody created a website for a softball tournament. And that softball tournament was supposed to be for JP Morgan employees. So those JP Morgan employees thinking, hey, softball would be fun, a company organization, team bonding, that sounds great, let's go ahead and do it. So pre-COVID, of course. They all registered for the softball games, and they had to create an account when they did that. They all used the same password that they use on their JP Morgan accounts. So the person who owned that website, all they had to do was take all those passwords that had been typed in, go over to JP Morgan's website, and type in the same passwords and the same usernames, and that's how they were able to get into JP Morgan. Just because people were using the same password at work as they were for fun. So please take this seriously. If JP Morgan and SolarWinds, one a very heavy security company and the other one a huge investment company, can get breached, we all can. And I'm going to harp on something else that we've all heard about a lot, patching. Patching is incredibly important, and patching is not just about new features. It's not just created by Microsoft to annoy us every time they change the GUI and we can't figure out where the buttons are to see the time or whatever. Patching primarily is about fixing vulnerabilities. And I apologize, this picture that I took is from a slide from last year, and I had clicked on the wrong one, so I'm sorry that the dates are wrong, but the date is still realistic and still there. If you notice, right here, you'll see in May that there's very little vulnerabilities, and then it jumps up to about 11,000 in June. It goes back down, goes back up again, and kind of maintains that same sort of trend, right? There's a reason for that. Microsoft releases patches, and they release patches with vulnerabilities every month on a Tuesday. And what they do is they'll find all these vulnerabilities, they'll keep them close to the chest so that hacking groups don't know they exist. They'll figure out all the ways to fix it. Then they'll release a giant patch on that month, on that Tuesday, that fixes all those vulnerabilities. And then they go back to looking for more again. And it becomes this up and down cycle where you fix the vulnerabilities, they get patched, more are found, and then it comes up and down again. I'm sorry, excuse me, everyone. This is Diamond. This is our patching strategy. We actually patch every week. We patch weekly on the same day, every day, for all of our clients to try and mitigate that. But the reason that I'm kind of harping on patching and I'm harping on vulnerabilities is because surprisingly, most people don't patch. And when you don't patch, you're vulnerable, and you probably don't realize how vulnerable you are. Back in 2016, maybe perhaps even 2015, the NSA had their tools leaked online. Excuse me, one second here. Sorry, everyone. If you go back and you look at the group I was talking about called the Equation Group, sometimes called the Shadow Broker Group, they were able to acquire tools from the NSA, the National Security Agency. We don't know exactly when, but they put them up for auction on the dark web, sort of the seedy underbelly of the internet. They put it back up for auction in August of 2016. Microsoft then found out about it. Even though the NSA had known about these tools and these vulnerabilities for years, the NSA never told Microsoft. Once the NSA realized that those tools and those vulnerabilities in Microsoft had been released onto the dark web, they then told Microsoft. So Microsoft was scrambling in 2017 to try and come out with a patch to fix this problem. In March of 2017, they were able to release this patch to fix this vulnerability. The vulnerability was called Eternal Blue, and it was basically a one-click button with the IP address of the target machine, and you could get in. I've used it myself. It took me about 30 seconds. There's demonstrations on YouTube. There's write-ups on it. You can go to GitHub and download it. It's freely available, and it will let you into any Windows server you want that hasn't been patched by this. Microsoft released that patch in 2017. By April of 2017, the shadow brokers had sold that vulnerability with a tool that manipulated it. And by May, ransomware using ransomware by the name of WannaCry, if you guys have heard of WannaCry, if that sounds familiar, was released. And WannaCry spread throughout the entire world. I believe it hit over 150 countries. It affected well over 1 million computers and cost astronomical amounts of damage in terms of ransomware. But the thing that's interesting about it is Microsoft released the patch before Eternal Blue was actually released online. Before WannaCry came out, Microsoft had already released that patch. So that tells you between March and May, there were millions of computers that didn't do that patch. They didn't install, they didn't do Windows updates, and they were still vulnerable. And today, when I go and I onboard new customers and we submit all of our tools to them and we do all the patching for them, we still find clients today who have not patched this. 3-4 years later now, they're still getting hit by this ransomware that came out in 2017, and there's already a patch for it. That's why I harp on patching. That's why I say patching is so important. But the number one reason why most people get hit by ransomware beyond anything else is they don't have that culture of security. They don't have that mindset of training their users, of looking for the suspicious emails, of thinking for a moment before they take that USB drive they found in the parking lot and plugging it in. They just don't think about it. Even though it is on the rise, social engineering is the primary way that you can breach a network. Most people still fall for it because they're not trained, because they're not taking it seriously. A little fun fact that I like to talk about just real quick before we move on to this demo is the biggest threat to physical security is often a cardboard box. The most popular penetration tester in the UK is a 5'2" woman, roughly in her mid-30s. And she's become the most popular penetration tester for getting into buildings and getting into the CEO's office and getting his ledger or his contact list or his iPhone. All she does is she pulls up in her car, she pulls out a box that's overflowing with papers, and she walks in. And security will hold the door open for her because obviously she can't open it herself because her hands are full. And everybody will just let her waltz on through because, you know, she's just this young lady who, you know, is not very physically imposing, very innocent looking, and she just waltzes through that building, gets in the elevator, goes up to the top floor. People assume, oh, she must be a secretary or she must be this or that. And she just walks on in to the CEO's building or the CEO's office and gains access. And I read a couple interviews with her, and she has done this literally hundreds of times. I myself have tested it both in the Army and as a civilian. I've also done this before. It's very, very simple because people don't have that mindset of, wait a minute, who is this person? They could be a threat. They could be an issue. Maybe we should double check. If your company doesn't have that culture of security, it's not going to occur to them. And they're going to let that person in, whether they let that person in through the front door or through an email or an attachment or whatever. This is the primary way. And this wouldn't be an IT demonstration if I didn't include at least one comic book reference, right? So let me be a nerd for a moment here. If we all want to be the superheroes of our organizations and we all want to be secure and we all want to take things seriously, then we need to make sure we're trained. We need to make sure that we are as professional as we can be when it comes to cybersecurity and training our users. We all want to be the heroes, right? We all want to be the guy that stopped the ransomware or didn't click on that email. You don't want to be the person who clicked on it. So definitely, I encourage all of you, look into security awareness training programs. Diamond has some, there are other ones out there. You can do an ad hoc one, you can find resources online, but whatever you do, take security awareness training seriously, educate your users because they are the number one risk and the number one way that most people get hit by ransomware. Now, pivoting again, there is a silver lining to this. Technology has come a long way. Technology has become this thing where, you know, sometimes ransomware used to be this thing where once you got hit, that was it, and there was no way to stop it. These days, there are ways to stop it. I am deeply in love with SentinelOne. I love the product that they have. It's part of our stack, both internally and for all of our clients. I insist on it, just like I insist on MFA, because it is a very advanced tool. And I won't go into all of this. Notice here on the slide, we talk about nation-grade advanced persistent threats, such as Fancy Bear and Dynamite Panda and all of those. SentinelOne is prepared for that kind of stuff, and SentinelOne does its very best to stop that. So remember how I talked about those layers of security. if you look at this is the last 30 days for somebody we had just recently onboarded. And in here, you see 3 ransomwares have gotten all the way to the endpoint. What that means is, I'm sorry, excuse me, they got through the firewall, they got through the spam filter, they got through someone's email, they got through the human layer, and they were clicked on. And they were activated on an endpoint protection. Or I'm sorry, they were activated on an endpoint. The only thing that saved those 3 incidences, those 3 companies from getting hit by ransomware was literally the antivirus, the advanced endpoint protection on those systems that is SentinelOne. Nothing else stopped it because they were able to get through all those layers of security despite the fact that they had them all. And while that does seem, I think, in some ways alarming and scary, it also, I think, demonstrates the power that happens when you're prepared. Because even if they had somehow gotten through SentinelOne, we still had incident response plans in place. We still had remote backups. We would have had them back up within an hour. I don't doubt it. But this just goes to demonstrate you can't have enough layers of protection. But we all have a budget, and when you pick those layers of protection, make sure you're picking the right ones. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen because I love this demo. I think you guys will learn a lot from it. Stephen, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, sir, and I will let you take it from there.
All right, cool. Give me 2 seconds. All right, so hopefully everybody can see that. Speaking of SentinelOne, I'm just jumping kind of right in, but for those that have never seen us before, maybe you don't even know what SentinelOne is, this is actually the same console or type of console. I'm not actually in DiamondIT's console right now, of course, but this is the same console that they use to actually see the threats and alerts that our solution is actually reporting to them. So as far as demonstration goes, I'm actually going to hit an endpoint with a strand of ransomware. But before I do that, just a couple of housekeeping items. I'm going to let the ransomware all the way through. So I'm running my agent in a mode that we call detect mode. So normally, the way that DiamondIT would have you set up is you would actually be in protect mode. The agent would actually autonomously figure out, hey, this is malicious activity, kill and quarantine it, and then alert them. So that way they can investigate further if needed. In this case, though, it doesn't make a cool demo if something's not getting hit. So I'm actually going to let it through. We're still going to see the alerts come through. But at the very end, I'm actually going to show how easy it is with our platform and with the tools that DiamondIT has at their disposal to actually recover a system, even if it gets hit. So without further ado, let me go back here. And I'll pivot back to my screen. So on the left-hand side, I've got my command and control server. So this is a server that the threat actor would have stood up. And basically all it's doing is it's listening for communications coming from other victim systems. And then what they can do is once it talks to their server, they can start issuing new commands to the endpoint. They could download payloads like ransomware, things like that to the victim and carry on. So what I've done ahead of time was I've actually made a payload in the form of a Word document. Now, I'll let you use your imagination as to how it got there. Maybe it came in via email. Maybe it was from just a USB drive that you plugged in and copied some data off of. Or maybe you just downloaded it from a website. It could be a number of different ways. But in this case, I have it on my desktop. And you know what? Maybe I haven't gone through my training. This looks legit. Looks like an annual invoice to me. So I'm going to go ahead and crack it open. Now, in this case, I've added some text saying this isn't what it looks like. And you know what? I might freak out if I'm an end user and I might say, oh, wow, that's not what I was expecting. Let me close this before anyone finds out. Now, the way that I built this is closing the document is actually what triggers my payload. So what it's going to do is on the left-hand side here, we can actually see our endpoint from the right communicating to my command and control server. And when I close the document, you, of course, hopefully saw the SentinelOne alert that popped up right when we closed the doc. Now, this could just take a second. I'm just waiting for my command and control server to finish sending its payload over. Takes a little bit. I got to
Stephen, can I ask a question?
Faster. Yeah, go for it.
So let's say I open the annual invoice and I see that it looks weird and I close it and I then try and delete it. Will that stop the ransomware?
In this case, no, because what happens in my case is there's already a process that's loaded into memory. So if you just try to kill the document, it doesn't really matter because I've already got a process running. It's communicating to my command and control server, and the wheels are already set in motion as it will. So so at this point, the payload has hit. We can see that it issued the rest of its commands and it dropped everything. So what we should see is in a second here is we'll actually see the ransomware go through all my files, my pictures, and it'll go ahead and encrypt it. I always like to show it live because it's much more impactful. And for those of you that have never actually seen ransomware take over a system, it will come as a shock to see once it hits how quickly it actually goes through and deals damage. So I'll give it a sec here. It's still sending it down. Now, what this did ahead of time was as it was attacking the system, let me go ahead and pull up my my task scheduler here. Is my attack actually does a few things specifically around preparation. So in this case, it created a task on my computer, which is going to go ahead and start my ransomware process at 9 a.m. every day. So a lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to reboot my computer or shut it down, and that gets rid of it as well. Well, in this case, it's not, because it's just going to restart every morning. So so this is actually taking a little bit longer than it usually does. So I'll give it a little bit more time. Worst case, I always keep ransomware in my back pocket on every computer. So I promise everyone watching, there will be ransomware and there will be encryption happening, but
Stephen,
I'll be a little bit more patient.
That you're using a Word document to trigger a ransomware. I just read the other day that somewhere in the 40% range of all malware is actually transmitted via Office files, Office documents. Things like Excel and Word and PowerPoint. And you get that little button at the top of your window that says enable content. Make sure you know where this file is coming from. That's what they're talking about. Malware, almost 40% of the time is transmitted via Office documents anymore. So.
Yeah. So it looks like it's stuck actually getting the payload there. So what I'm going to do is we're gonna speed this up a little bit. I always keep a little bit of ransomware local to each endpoint. Of course, in this case, I didn't. So let me copy a strand over real quick. Apologize. So it always helps to have a backup. Bring that over. And actually, give me 2 seconds. What I'll do is there's a faster way that I can get this done, and I'm going to bring it back because apparently something got stuck on my C2. Apologies. The fun part is I just showed Cody this not even an hour ago.
Yep. Just demoed.
That worked perfectly fine, but this is what you get sometimes when you do live demos. I didn't make the right sacrifices to the demo gods, so we'll get this back up and I'll launch a new one.
While you're doing that, Stephen, I see there's some questions here that I glossed over while presenting here. Kevin, you mentioned you heard that Bitcoin could be traced now. That's a complicated question. Government entities perhaps can in certain cryptocurrencies, but generally speaking, what they'll use won't be traceable. I won't comment on Bitdefender. I will say I'm a big proponent of what we use, but Bitdefender, it does the job, just not quite as well. And yes, when I talked about patching, I meant Windows updates, but I also meant updates for anything. Firmware updates for your firewalls, firmware updates for your servers. There was just a vulnerability literally just released as I got on this webinar today that I was talking to my coworker about for VMware. That VMware had a vulnerability for a file upload where you could upload a file and it would let you in no matter what credentials you had. So updates for everything, every program, QuickBooks, Word, all of it. When I talk about patching, I mean everything. So
cool. So thank you for answering some of those. And we got my C2 server back up. So let's run this one more time. Should go through. ahead and I'll close it again. Yeah, it's funny. It's the one time that I need it to run, right? Out of hundreds of times that I do it, always does it. But yeah, anything made by humans is imperfect. And yes, I did script it, so it's probably built with my imperfections. But I'll give it a sec here to let it continue. So while we're actually waiting for it to hit, just so that we're not sitting here staring at the screen again, waiting for that to go through. What I'll show you is a little bit of what DiamondIT is actually looking at when alerts like this come through. So number one, they probably have alerts and things like that set up, so they'll instantly know. But there's a lot of different dashboards in the product. So in this case, I can see I have alerts which are not mitigated. So I'm going to go ahead and click into there. And right away, I can actually see what we have here is my annual invoice that I opened. Now, if I go back, I'll click on View Threat Details, and it looks like the payload actually hit. So I'll maybe I just wasn't patient enough last time. Yeah, there it goes. So we've got the ransomware note here. All my data is encrypted. So I was probably just not being patient, but this got it done quicker. So all my data is actually encrypted. And if I take a look at the note, I do use live ransomware in all my demos. So this one's one known as GanCrab. And one of the nice things about this one is it'll actually encrypt even if the endpoint doesn't have a network connection. So some of the ransomware out there, they have to communicate to another server to do what we call a key exchange. In this case, if you were on an airplane and this was built into something that you opened, this would actually still encrypt the endpoint, whether it has a connection or not. But in this case, endpoint got schwacked. So I'll go back in. This is the alert for the document that I opened. And there's a lot of useful information in here. For instance, real quickly, we can see every behavior that we saw for why this got detected. So we can see things like the fact that it was using PowerShell exploitation techniques. We can see that the document was behaving not as it normally would. So there's a lot of useful information right up front. But we also have a very pretty picture that it paints too. So we correlate all this information for the analyst. So that way, you know, Cody doesn't have to go and spend like 8 hours trying to dig through computer logs and stuff like that and figure out exactly what happened and determine if that computer is clean. Is it something that he has to follow up with? Coincidentally, that's what I used to have to do, and I spent 8 years at one of the companies Cody went very in-depth with, and I used to spend hours doing this. So the cool thing here is I can see the Word document opening, and if I take a look, I can see this is actually the ransomware process here. If we scroll down, we can see every single file that it encrypted and dropped on the system. I can even go in and take a look at other things like Cody mentioned the destruction of backups at some point. That's typically one thing that ransomware will always try to do. So in this case, we can actually see it issuing commands to destroy shadow copies, which are snapshots built right into the Windows operating system. So that's an easy way for people to recover data, but they specifically target that. And then here we can see it creating that scheduled task that I showed you guys earlier. So at this point, we of course know that this is malicious. And again, the product, if you saw the alerts popping up, the product would have prevented this the moment that that document attempted to spawn the PowerShell session. But again, demos need to have a little bit of flair to them. So in this case, what we'll do is I'm going to issue these responses manually, but these are all things which can be 100% automated. So if it's 1 a.m. in the morning, yeah, Cody doesn't have to wake up and actually mitigate this. It's mitigated for him by the tool, and then when one of his SOC team members takes a look at it, they might not even have to do anything other than resolve the case. But the important thing is the data is there so that they can make that educated decision literally within seconds or minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and click apply here. And if I give it a couple seconds, we should actually see it delete the text files, aka the ransom notes that are all over the system. And then if I can beat it, let's go to task scheduler. I might be a little late because it already remediated it by the time I could get to the task scheduler. But we're going to see it actually cleaned up the task that I had set to restart the process at 9 a.m. every day. And as you can see here, it's going ahead and recovering the files one by one. If I jump into a file, it's now back in plain text. So those are just that's just a quick look at some of the tools that they have at their disposal. It's by no means the entire platform that they're using to protect your endpoints, but that's one of the core key competencies that our product provides. So I'll hand it back to you, Cody.
Thank you, sir. I love to see it progress, what technology can do for us.
Yeah.
So I won't take up anyone else's time. Without further ado, if you guys have any questions, if you want to know how Diamond can help, if you have anything about SentinelOne, or you want to know more about security, or you want to get with us, by all means, contact us. I'm sure there will be some information down in chat for how to reach us. But in order to kind of wrap this up, because I know we're about 4 minutes over time here, if anyone has any questions, we'll stick around for a few minutes here and answer them. But otherwise, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you for being patient and dealing with my cough and some minor hiccups with scripts and things. And you all have a wonderful day. Thank you, everyone.
I'll hang on with you if questions come through. I got plenty of time. So
yeah, absolutely.
We can hang out for a few minutes. Everyone's microphone is muted, but you can always unmute, go off mute, and ask your questions. We would love to hear from you guys. If you guys have any takeaways or anything we can answer for you, don't forget to unmute your mic.
I have a couple people typing right now. Looks like some questions are coming in.
Yeah, conveniently, landscapers decided to start leaf blowing and lawn mowing. So I apologize for any background noise going around me.
They're psychic. They have a sixth sense when that kind of stuff.
They just know, man. Yeah, they just know. And just a reminder, I can't see chat, so if there is a question in there for me, go ahead and read it out.
I have a question here from Kevin. I'm going to pass this to Matt and to Cody. And Kevin's asking if Diamond deals with only security or with all things IT.
Yeah, I'll take this, Cody. I would. We're a full service IT firm with a security focus, so I would say that we deal with all things IT and could answer just about any question you might have regarding IT.
Yeah, I would say so. And Steve, do you guys deal with managing customer setups that need to be CMMC compliant? I would say yes, Matt.
We're actually pursuing our own CMMC level 3 compliancy as we speak, and I sit on a CMMC special interest group with others that are seeking compliancy. So I could definitely think we could help with anyone that's looking to go on that journey.
Mm-hmm. It's a long journey too.
As you're looking at CMMC compliance, there's a lot involved with CMMC compliance, and even just marching forward, just making sure that you have controls in place. You can always mature your security offering and your organizational operations on that path to CMMC.
Yeah, we follow the NIST framework is what CMMC builds off of, and of course there's several levels to it as well too that kind of dictate where in that chain that company needs to fall. So we can definitely help with that conversation, I think. I had a question on Darktrace, Cody or Stephen. I'll send this. What do you know about Darktrace?
I'll let you go first, Cody.
Yeah, maybe be more specific in what part about Darktrace. I'm aware of them, but
he's responding here a little bit. See what Kevin has. It's a good thing to have. Is it a good thing to have?
Stephen, you're smiling. I'm curious.
Yeah, so a lot of people see our product and they're like, oh, you guys compete with Darktrace, right? And so I get this kind of a lot, and Darktrace is more on the network layer side of the house, whereas we're completely focused on endpoints. So, I mean, again, I'm not a Darktrace rep, I'm not a Darktrace engineer. They have a wicked sick UI. Sorry, I'm from New England, so I say wicked a lot. But they provide kind of the same level of network of forensics that we do on the endpoint, but they focus a little bit more on like network packets and packets traversing and infrastructure, whereas we're just operating at different layers. So in my opinion, if you're asking, hey, is it good to have another layer in your security toolkit? I'll never say no, because if you can keep adding more layers between you and the attacker in meaningful ways, I'm not just going to say just pile on a whole bunch of stuff on a shelf and think it's going to work. In meaningful ways, if you properly set up those different layers, get them to work together. For instance, I would say adding another security layer is always a good idea. But if you're just trying to get it just because you see, hey, this is another security product and I want to add yet another one to my stack, sometimes that can also slow down your team because, well, number one, it's one more product they have to manage, maintain, deploy out there. It's another product that's soaking up cost, right? So you want to make sure that you are thinking about the tools that you're adding to your stack, making sure that they play nicely together. There's this big new hot topic thing called XDR, which is all about data correlation and correlating responses and stuff like that between products and platforms. So you want to make sure that it's meshing well with the rest of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, Kevin, I don't know which organization you're with. I will say if you're looking for a smaller company, Darktrace can be pretty pricey. And I see we've got Steve in here typing something real quick.
I keep thinking you keep talking about me, but I just noticed there was a Steve in the attendee. So
yeah.
I was like, I'm not typing anything. I can't even see the chat. What are you talking about?
Kevin, you're very welcome, sir. Great questions. Who should I, Steve is asking, who should I reach out to for discussing what managed services would be best for our company? Everything from machine management to CMMC compliance and eventual certification. Matt? Or Maria. I think Maria's also on top of it.
We can share everyone's email right now in the chat.
Yeah, we can do that.
Sure.
Steve, DiamondIT is in Bakersfield, California, kind of a mid-southernish area of California. I will say that we do have a large amount of clients that are not in this region. Oh yeah, absolutely. Northern LA and Ventura is perfect. Yeah, it's not a far drive for us at all. All right, cool. Well, I know Maria put her information in chat. She would be a great person to reach out to Kevin and Steve both. She's great at what she does. She's very, I would say, client obsessed. She loves making people happy and trying to see to your guys' needs. So yeah, she's sending emails right now. She's on top of it. So Matt, I think unless there's anything else, we could probably wrap up today's webinar. And Stephen, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it, sir. Appreciate all your help in the demo.
Yeah, thanks for having me, everybody. And yeah, if you guys ever need anything, just give me a holler.
Absolutely. Everyone, thank you for joining us. I think we're going to go ahead and we'll end the webinar here today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your patience and have a great day.